Hey y'all, I'm Amy Bitter, and today's video is going to be about leopard gecko care based on veterinarian recommendations and also my own personal experience by owning a leopard gecko for a couple of years now. I wanted to do this video because there's some leopard gecko care videos that aren't that great and there's some misinformation, and so I really wanted to give y'all a video that takes a bunch of research from veterinarians and give you guys the information that veterinarians recommend how to take care of leopard geckos and not opinions. So most of my information can be referenced from the How to Keep Your Leopard Gecko Healthy, Happy, and Safe brochure from LSU Vet School, written by the Association of Reptilian and Amphibian Veterinarians. And we'll just go over generally how to take care of a leopard gecko, what to expect. Also, I take care of 30 plus leopard geckos in research, and I participate in leopard gecko research specifically, and also feeder insects. I'm also an animal science undergraduate major, graduating in May, finally. And then I'm gonna go to vet school in fall 2021. And I really want to become an exotic veterinarian. So I really wanted to give you guys some really great information that's evidence-based and not opinion-based.
So first, you guys, let's look at what a healthy leopard gecko looks like. This is my leopard gecko, Fry, that I rescued. And so we'll start with the head. They should have a clear eyes. They should be bright, alert, responsive, and have an attitude. If you have a leopard gecko, you know they're sassy. They should have no retained sheds on their toes. Boy, don't jump. And he's missing some toes, and this can be caused due to stuck shed, cutting off the circulation, and then the toes just die off. That was from his previous owner. He is a little overweight. You can tell by looking at his back and how there is a little fatness and there's a ridge. That is a sign of an overweight gecko. They should have a nice fat tail. A skinny tail is an indication that they are not in good body condition. And then in addition to, they should have a clear vent. Let's see. No. A clear vent. Okay. We are very sassy. Anyways, if you saw that, he had a very clear vent. One thing to note on these guys is when you handle them, you don't want to grab them by their tail because they can drop their tail. Luckily, they can grow it back, unlike our friend crested geckos. They cannot grow their tail back. So it will grow back, it just won't look exactly the same.
A little background knowledge of leopard geckos. They originate from the grasslands and desert of Afghanistan. Their average lifespan in captivity is 10 to 25 years. Their average weight should be about 45 to 60 grams. Fry weighs 79 grams. He is overweight. We're working on it. And there's different types of morphs. A wild type's gonna have a bright yellow body with some black spots. There's other morphs that through breeding has been expressed, but yeah. A little bit what to expect about leopard geckos as pets. They're very docile. They do tolerate handling and petting. Not to say they like it, but they do tolerate us. One thing to note though, a lot of them I find they're pretty squirmy and they have a pretty big attitude. So don't be too surprised if your leopard gecko doesn't like to be held for minutes on end, like a bearded dragon does or something like that. So that just comes with their personality, and not to say all of them do that, especially mine's really squirmy and sassy. So let's talk a little bit about husbandry. Let's begin with the tank. They should have a tank from 10 to 20 gallons. Fry is a pretty big leopard gecko, not in weight, but in size as well. So I found a 10-gallon tank was a little too small for him, so I put him in a 20-gallon tank. So just know that just because a 10-gallon can be okay, just look at your leopard gecko and be like, is this too small for you? Would I want to be in this small of a tank? So just some things to keep in mind. Not to say none of them can be kept in 10-gallon. There's definitely some smaller ones out there, but I would recommend 15 to 20 gallons. Leopard geckos are terrestrial species, so they need a tank that is short and long versus a normal tank and tight and tall. They don't really climb. They need more ground space to walk around. You want to provide them a variety of hides, from hot hides to a cool hide and also human hide. I have 2 hides. One's a hot hide, one's a cool hide, but it's also a human hide, so I have some sphagnum moss. I do plan to get another hide in there just so we can have more variety, but definitely at least 2 hides, a hot and a cool, so they can regulate their temperature. You should provide a water dish and some things to climb on. I also do enrichment, so I put some fake plants in there so he can see more than just rocks. The next thing to talk about in husbandry is substrate. Substrate is a really highly debated topic in leopard gecko care because there's not a clear, concise answer on what is the best substrate for them. And also there's not that much research to prove that. So a lot of it is opinion based. The pamphlet that is written by the Association of Reptilian and Amphibian Veterinarians recommends to not use loose substrate, but I use loose substrate. I use dried out eco earth. It's just, I think you can use loose substrate, just be mindful of impaction. So when you feed them live insects, you don't want them to hunt them in there because they can eat some of that substrate and become impacted. But eco earth passes through their digestive system pretty easily compared to sand or soil. So I've never had an issue with impaction, but I would definitely be on a more hesitant side about the sand and soil when it comes to impaction. Also, I'm in favor of loose substrate because they can exhibit natural behaviors like digging, which they can't do on paper towels and tile or repti carpet. So I definitely am in favor of loose substrate, but you can use other substrates like tiles, really recommended. Paper towels are, but paper towels people may not want to do because it's not that pretty, but you can do it. Repti carpet's another great alternative as well. It's a little better looking. It's kind of the same idea as paper towels. Just being mindful that they can get their toes stuck in the carpet and rip out a nail. So just keep that in mind. Some subjects to completely avoid is calcium sand, walnut shells, bark, anything along those lines that really can't pass through the digestive system that easily. That's why it's not recommended. Also, anything with high humidity is pretty much not recommended too, since they are desert species and they don't require the high humidity, and they can develop an upper respiratory tract infection if the husbandry is not kept correctly, especially their humidity. Another thing to note is the sand. I know Petco and PetSmart and other chain pet companies recommend sand for whatever reason. Be mindful with calcium sand, and especially because if your gecko or any reptile is deficient in calcium, their body will make them eat the sand because they know it contains calcium, and it will help counteract the effects of being have a negative calcium phosphorus ratio. So, and can lead, if they eat too much, an impaction, which an impaction is just essentially their whole GI tract or a section of their GI tract is filled up with stuff. In this case, it would be sand, and nothing can pass through, and their appetite decreases. It can get pretty bad if it's catched too late. Their prognosis is pretty poor, but if you catch it early enough, you can save them and make corrections to your husbandry. Some other parameters of husbandry to discuss is humidity and temperature gradient. Their humidity should be around 10 to 30% since they are a desert species. And you have, if let's say you have no idea what 10 to 30% humidity is and you don't have a hydrometer, that is roughly the humidity of your house. So they don't really require mistings like the tropical species, but given that you don't really have to mist their tanks, they definitely need a humid hide to regulate their own humidity. So they can be in their dry environment, but if they need more moisture, or especially when they're going through shed, they can go in their humid hide and help them take off their shed as well. My leopard gecko had a notorious stuck shed, and so I put a human hide in there, and now he doesn't really ever have stuck shed because now he can regulate his own humidity, and it does help them to shed properly. Their temperature, so they should have a hot and a cool side. The hot side should be around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I have no idea what it is in Celsius, but here in America, it's Fahrenheit for whatever reason. So it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And then on their cool side, it should be about mid 70s. The reason you want a temperature gradient is because leopard geckos and all reptiles are ectotherms. Ectotherms are organisms that rely on the environment for their internal body temperature homeostasis. While we are endotherms and we can create our own heat, reptiles cannot. So they have to require for the environment to have their correct body temperature. So that's why you want a hot side. So if they're feeling cool, they will go to the hot side, warm up, and then when they're too hot or they're warm enough, they will go to the cool side. And so that allows for them to regulate their own body temperature. Next I want to talk about is heat, supplemental heat. It's generally recommended to use heat mats with the thermostat. I use a thermostat probe where his hot side is, so I can regulate his hottest temperatures. And sometimes if it gets too hot, I'll just unplug it, let it cool down, I'll plug it back in. Generally stays around in the 90s, low 90s. But as time goes on, sometimes the probe starts to touch the glass, and I'm like, okay, well, I know it's not like 110 in there. So I sometimes too, if it is I think too hot, I will unplug it to let it cool off. Also, you can use heat bulbs. Most people don't recommend heat bulbs just because you can't regulate the temperature as well. And they're not out and about basking like a bearded dragon. They're going to be in their hide wanting to absorb the heat that way when they're all hidden and stuff. So a heat bulb isn't really going to get into the hide and make it nice and warm. Things to avoid for supplemental heat is a heat rock. Please don't use heat rocks. They have no thermostat or set temperature, so they just get really hot and then reptiles can burn themselves. So just avoid heat rocks in general for any reptile. Another bulb I want to talk about is UVB. There is a study written by Dr. Mitchell and some other people, and this was done quite a while ago, but the research basically suggests that leopard geckos can benefit from UVB. You want the UVB bulb to be around 11 to 12 inches away from the bottom of the tank. I put mine too close, and what can happen is they can get sunburned. And what a sunburn is they just shed like once a week or once every 2 weeks. It's really frequent shedding. It's not like our kind of sunburns. So that's how you can know if it's too close. And you can add books or, stack it away and higher. And UVB too, it doesn't need to be on like 12 hours a day like a blue-tongued skink or a bearded dragon. It only needs to be on a couple hours a day if you decide to do UVB and use it. So that can be nice because you don't have to replace it every 6 months. You can replace it once a year because you're not turning it on for that long.
I just wanted to show you guys my tank for my leopard gecko. It's a 20-gallon breeder, whatever it's called. It's the one that's like shallower than others. There's his water dish that I need to fill up. This is his cool side that has his cool hide. It's also a humid hide. I will be getting him a third hide soon. I have stepping stones and rocks and also fake plants for him to climb over, and also for enrichment as well. And then this is his hot hide. He was just out, so he feels nice and cool, so he wants to go warm him up. Another thing to mention is you want to put them in a glass tank with a screen lid because it allows for proper airflow.
Lastly, I wanted to talk about what they eat and a little bit about reptile nutrition. Leopard geckos are insectivores, so they hunt live insects. So You want to feed them live insects. Typically, I know on the market there's pre-killed insects and pre-formulated leopard gecko diet food, but honestly, the odds are you're gonna end up with some crickets in a container in your closet, or like for me, I have mealworms in my fridge. So it just comes with owning an insectivore reptile. Another really important thing that I cannot stress enough with feeding insects is gut loading them. Gut load, gut load, gut load. It's so important, because without gut loading your your insects, they're pretty much useless and you're not providing a balanced diet. So basically what gut loading is that you're feeding the insect their food that they're gonna eat, and then the insect has more vitamins that they lack, or minerals, like especially in the reptile world, it's calcium and phosphorus ratio, super important. So maybe there's more calcium. It provides everything that the insect by itself lacks, they eat. And then when you feed it to your reptile, they get all the good stuff too. So it's a nice balanced diet. Another thing to note with gut loading is you can't gut load, just feed the cricket, your colony of crickets, like once, and then 3 days later you're gonna feed it to your bearded dragon or leopard gecko. It's useless, because the insect is an organism too, so it has used the food for its own body and it's pretty much depleted out, or anything wasted will go out in fecal or waste product. So you've got to feed the insect within 24 hours of gut loading if you don't gut load like continuously. Another thing I wanted to state is a lot of the videos on YouTube, they really stress for leopard gecko care to feed a variety of feeder insects, which is great. I totally agree. But fact of the matter is leopard geckos are picky eaters. Found that out through my own and a lot of research geckos. They are just picky eaters. I mean, my leopard gecko literally just eats crickets and mealworms, and he refuses anything else. So don't feel bad if your leopard gecko doesn't eat tubia roaches, and people made you feel bad if you don't feed like every insect in the world kind of deal. So don't feel bad. You can't force your leopard gecko to eat every insect you give it. Some of them are just literally picky eaters, so don't feel too bad. Another thing to state about feeding these guys, a majority of their insects should be crickets, because there's so much research about gut loading them. So they're a much more balanced diet and feeder insect compared to mealworms or black soldier fly larvae or some other feeders out there. So, but definitely offer a variety if you can, like mealworms, superworms, black soldier fly larvae, hornworms, you name it, try to feed them. Also, don't feed any wild caught insects from outside. Just buy feeder insects that are commercially raised and bred. So a little bit about Reptile Nutrition, in addition to the feeder insects, is calcium powder. Here's some calcium powder. No, I am not sponsored. And multivitamin supplement, whether that be liquid or powder. So calcium powder, you want to dust your crickets or whatever feeder insect every time you feed them, because if there's any sort of deficiency, even when you gut load the insects, this will be also supplied through the dusting. This is super important because we want to prevent metabolic bone disease, which is super common and totally a preventable disease. It's more referring to secondary nutritional hyperparathyroidism, which is caused by the deficiency of calcium in the diet. And then the animal gets deficient in calcium and starts pulling calcium reserves from bones. So it's really important. We want to prevent that. Calcium is really important in reptiles. And the other side of things is multivitamin. If there's any kind of deficiency in any kind of vitamin, whether that be fat soluble or water soluble vitamins, we want to provide that through some kind of supplement. We want to dust the feeder insects once a week or once every other week, mostly because we don't want to cause some kind of fat-soluble vitamin toxicity, which is not too good. So unless you have my kind of leopard gecko, which is going to refuse any food that's dusted in the multivitamin powder, then there's a liquid form. No, I'm not sponsored. I wish. I'm a broke college student. And you just follow the instructions. Most of them say like apply a drop on their nose and they'll just like clean it off their face. But that's what I have to do. So that's just a little bit about supplementing some minerals and vitamins. So that's just a general overview of leopard gecko care that's evidence-based and veterinarian recommendations, and also some things I've learned from doing research with leopard geckos and feeder insects. I know this video was probably really long. I just wanted to stress some important parts and explain also why it's so important, because I find a lot of videos lack some really important things, and they're like, it's really important, but don't explain why. So I just wanted to, explain like why calcium is so important to, feed every time you dust, or gut loading, and a temperature gradient, all these things. So y'all can have a full understanding of why it's so important. I am not a famous YouTuber, so I'm filming off my phone and I'm using my blue tongue skink heat bulb as a light source. So you get what you get, and I'm sorry. Maybe if I'm become popular, I can maybe have a nice camera, or I don't know, be cooler. I don't know. Not so boring. But yeah, also sorry guys, it's a lot of me talking. My leopard gecko is super finicky and I just took him to the vet. So he's pretty over me right now because I had to poke him with some NSAIDs and wipe his mouth with chlorhexidine. So he's a little pissed at me. So that's why I don't have him chilling on my shoulder, even though he probably wouldn't do that. So yeah, you guys get my lovely face, and sorry about that. I'm sorry I'm not a reptile, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If I have more time, I will do another evidence-based or care guide. I own 3 different lizards, so I have a pretty good knowledge of husbandry for those lizards, and also to go maybe in more depth about like what really is metabolic bone disease, or what are some other aspects or words that maybe the general population just doesn't know, and I can just explain it. So I hope you guys liked it. If you liked it, thumbs up. I really appreciate it. The lizards would appreciate it. And maybe in the future I'll make another video.